Welcome to Grow Sessions. My name is Tony Pavlakis from TSRgrow. I'm here with my good friend Jim Megerson from Anvil Agronomics. Jim, how you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm living a dream. We're in the cannabis world, and it's never a dull moment, so it's always fun stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of just get you on the podcast and kind of just chat with you just about some of the things. I know we're working collaboratively on a lot of projects, but I kind of just touch base on some things that we're going over and topics that we've kind of discussed in the past, and I thought that was pretty valuable. But at first, I mean, why don't you just tell a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how'd you get it, how long have you been an engineer? Tell us a little bit about Anvil Agronomics and, where you guys came from and, where you guys are based,
Yeah.
and then we'll jump right into some topics.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks, Tony. Appreciate being brought in. This is should be fun. And please, if you catch me going down a rabbit hole too far, just reel me back in.
Wait
Because
a second. Wait a second. Do engineers ever go down rabbit holes? Get out of
yeah, well, I'm a different engineer. I look at your shoes when I talk to you instead of my own. So
here. We like it.
I'm a
That's
little
what
bit
we
more
like. It's a
outgoing.
good thing.
But yeah, so actually, I got started in this. One of our daughters was diagnosed with MS back in about 2014, and I saw how cannabis. She was using cannabis to regulate her symptoms, and I'm a kid of the '70s, so cannabis was a totally different thing for me than that. I never thought of it as a medicine, if you will. And so I started investigating it, and then Missouri was starting to talk about legalizing in 2018, and that's where I'm from. And so, I mean, they were talking about it before because they legalized in 18. And so I started looking into, well, how do you grow indoors? And I found out just how complicated it was, and trying to create the perfect outdoor day inside the building 24/7. And in my past, I've been doing this, been in the engineering industry since 1984, over 40 years now. And our job was to keep the outdoor environment outside, not bring
Yeah.
it indoors. So it's a totally different paradigm shift. And there are no books to tell you how to design these systems in these buildings for growing indoors. And I'm kind of used to that because I've pioneered quite a few systems in my career and done some things that are pretty cool. And so I'm used to having to learn things on my own. But what I did is I just started, investigating, calling people. I went to Canada, went to Colorado, went to Canada, California, wherever anybody was growing that would let me talk with them, show me their facility, and I started learning that way. And then I started applying the science from my past experiences to that stuff. And and then luckily, Missouri passed Missouri passed medical in the beginning, and I was currently working at a design build mechanical contractor as the head of their engineering department. And I'm a little different kind of engineer. I went through sheet metal workers apprenticeship program while I was in college, so I've actually been out in the field and installed the things that we
You're living it.
design
You're building
today.
it.
Yeah, and I mean I've got the cut up hands and everything from doing that stuff. And my partner Corey, he is a lot like me except on the electrical side. So he did the same thing electrically, got his engineering degree, and he bent conduit, pulled wire out in the field. So we look at projects with a little different lens of what a typical engineer might.
Yeah, I mean
And
I think that's important. That's definitely
yeah,
important.
yeah. And so, I did those projects, design build. I mean, big projects like 80,000 square foot facilities, 30,000
Yeah.
square feet of canopy, and we did three or four of those on the western side of Missouri. And, when you do things design build, you own your mistakes.
Oh yeah.
There's no walking away. There's no blaming it on the engineer because the engineer is inside the construction company, right? And so, and luckily for us, we didn't make any huge mistakes. I mean, we made little mistakes. Like anything, but there were things that you could overcome and fix easily, right? Or figure out how to work around. So, but we learned a lot, that first 3 or 4 years. And the good news out of that, obviously, it turned out well because those customers said, "Hey, Jim, I'm going to do a building in, I'm going to do a building in Ohio, and I want you to be my engineer there, or I'm going to Michigan, or I'm going to, New Jersey. And the next thing you know, they said, my current employer, I was like, they go, we don't care if you do this on the side. Well, then the side got bigger than the real job. And I got tired of working, 60, 80 hours a week. So started my own company, Anvil Agronomics, and, and started that full time in 2020. And well, actually it was kind of part-time in 2020. And then, by now it's a full-time job, 24, 25. So
It's
it's been a,
nonstop.
it's been a great, a great ride so far.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I love hearing a little bit of people's history and kind of why, kind of how they get the how gets it, how people get into it is important. I feel like it's really, you see it and it's really interesting. On another call we had, I mean, sometimes as we're chatting through projects, we're always talking about the importance of system integrations, how to build an efficient grow room. Why
Yeah.
don't we kind of touch base on some of the things like we're chatting, like how there's like people buy separate pieces of it and how it kind of ties together. And sometimes they buy separate pieces and they don't tie together. I mean, can you touch
Yeah.
base on that, like the importance of those things?
Well, it's kind of funny, I think a lot of the people in this business don't always understand the design process and what
Sure.
happens. And I have some great examples. It's like currently, I'm on a job and it's almost like designing in a silo. They hired us as the engineer first to combine two rooms together into one room, for a new flower room, and make it, double tier to get more canopy. And so we're going about it. And you bring up every once in a while, hey, probably ought to get an architect involved in here. You probably ought to get a structural engineer involved in here. And, then we keep doing our work. And then you finally get to the end and say, look, guys, you really need an architect because the ceiling in this room is not going to match up with the ceiling in that room. And you just can't take this wall out because it could be a structurally supporting wall. We need to
Yep.
get us, and I'm putting 300-pound pieces of equipment above the ceiling hanging from the structure. I don't think the structure is going to hold it, because it's a pre-engineered metal building. We need to get a structural engineer involved. And then finally, it's like you come to the head, and it's like, yeah, you're right. And and
Yeah, it's
so
so funny, like just the communication with the like the
right,
dialogue going back and forth and trying to explain to people that you need to have everybody in communication together. Like you said, no creating
absolutely.
those.
So the integration starts with the design team,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, I know you've heard me say this before, but it's kind of like I get some clients and they'll say, "Oh, hey, I bought these dehumidifiers over here, or I bought these 5 carrier units over here, and I want you to figure out how to use them." It's like I feel like I'm on the Apollo at 13, you know, and the oxygen tank blew up, and now I got all these, rolls of duct tape and baling wire that I got to figure out. And I came from a farming background, so they say if you want somebody that can get things fixed and figured out, hire a farmer, because they know
It's
electrical, they know
it,
how to weld, they
oh,
know how to
it's
turn
so
a wrench.
true. Like
Yeah.
when I go to projects and and I go for a site visit, I was out yesterday and I pull up to this property and it is a legit farming facility. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do this and do that. I'm like, I've already
Hmm.
seen it happen like that. And I put nothing past them. If they say that they're going to be stripping this building out and it'll be empty next week, it'll be empty next week. I'm like, and it's
Oh,
pretty cool to see like that.
and oh, don't get me started on that. It's like, hey, I got a lease on this building, and you go in, it's like, where were you planning for your employees to park? There's no
Oh
parking
my God.
space available. Or where am I going to put a big CO2 tank? Because there's no room out here for that. Or equipment. Well, we thought you'd put on the roof. Well, there's no equipment on the roof now, so I'm going to bet you that it was never
Construction.
planned to have equipment on the roof. Um, or they want to do double tier and you got a 9 foot ceiling, or 9 foot to the bottom of structure. It's like,
Yeah, there's just nothing there.
yeah, there's
How,
just, yeah,
how does
exactly.
it how does a customer like when they look at it, like avoiding creating silos, but also too like balancing the initial investment versus the ROI of it, like when they're looking at a project.
Yeah. So, I think some of the advantages for us in especially since we have this, tool belt wearing construction background, if you will, I can look at things with a different lens. And like sometimes they get things in their head, the customers get things in their head already that you have to, and look, it's not my money, it's the customer's money. So my job is to come up with solutions and
Hmm.
give them good business information so that they can make a business decision, right? And if they want to do something other than something else, then it's just, hey, here's the compromise you might be making, or here's what may be good out of that, But my job is to balance cost with, with function, if you will. And it's kind of like one thing that I learned very quickly. You're buying this HVACD equipment that's running at, you know, depending on the size of it, $4,000 to $5,000 a ton. It's really expensive. And you take a room like the one behind me, that's got two 70-ton, nominal 70-ton integrated uh, HVAC dehumidify, equipment that'll do it all behind me, right? And so you got to have a place to put that stuff.
Yeah.
But when you look at the cost of this and you start to get up above 10,000 square feet of canopy, you can really take some economy to scale out of that. And if I took those units and instead of them being DX units and made them chilled water units with hot water coils in them, the price of that air handler goes down substantially. You're talking about $3 a CFM. And by reducing that cost, I have a lot of money left to use it
Yeah.
to buy chilled water and hot water pipe and chillers and boilers. And then we offset the lighting schedule on the rooms, which is not a
Oh yeah.
big lift. Um, Most people think it is, but it's really not. You can really save some money, not just on the HVAC, but on the electrical too. Because the electrical, if you're running all those rooms at the same schedule, you're running your HVAC full blast all the time, except for when the lights go off.
Yeah,
So
they
you
got to
have to
switch them.
design for that.
That's yeah. I mean, you definitely do. I mean, it's one of those things like that's I actually in another question that could follow up to that is like, so how do they manage that? Is that like an automation type system that they would put in there to do that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So you have building automation systems,
Yeah.
control systems. Some of the challenges of those are actually getting them to um, play well with others. I mean, lighting's not so hard to do. 0 to 10 volt signal type of thing. Um, and a lot of folks, they want to use their fertigation system, to
To
control
control
the
the lighting.
HVC and the lights. And I mean, that works fairly well, especially when if you're just sending set points to these things.
Sure.
But if you're not doing that, then you need a systems integrator on board that knows the space. That I've got one here locally that did a lot of those early projects with us, so we basically trained them, along the way. And there's others out there that do nothing but specialize in grow facilities or manufacturing. Um, but you need someone that understands that so they know that, hey, the owner's going to want me to build this schedule, right? And it's going to be 9 week long schedule. And each week they may want to change their temperature and humidity profiles along through there. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to control that room to humidity because you change the temperature 1 degree in the room and the humidity changes 2.5%. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is. It's really interesting. So you want to control to what's called a dew point because the dew point doesn't change that dramatic. It's measuring it's measuring the amount of moisture that's in the air, not the percentage of the moisture in the air. That's a big difference. So in the background, you may be setting the temperature and humidity in your system, but in the background, it's controlling to the dew point at that temperature and humidity. And
Is that a new
and
advancement, or has that been around forever, or is that just something that everybody knows about, they just don't do? Or I mean, you don't
uh,
really hear people
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about that much.
no, absolutely. So a lot of folks out there, who haven't been working in this space, engineers or even contractors, they don't think about that, right? So they're used to everybody hears about relative humidity. Well,
Yeah.
relative humidity, that term, it's exactly what it is. It's relative, right? So I went out to a job site and they say, hey, it's really, our space is really humid. And I go out there and I said, well, why are you running it at 60 degrees in here? And they go, well, we're trying to get the humidity down, so we're lowering the temperature. I said, but every time you lower the temperature a degree, you raised the humidity 2.5%. So I said, you're not drying the space out. I said, you need to raise the temperature a degree to lower the humidity 2.5 degrees. And they look at you like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like,
It's a weird calculation.
yeah, it
I've
is,
heard
it
this
is.
on
But you get
calls
them to,
before. It's
yeah,
hard to
you get them to
digest.
try it. You get them to say, just try it, please, just try it for me. And they try it and they go, holy cow, you're right. You know,
Yeah,
it does
it's
work
really
that way.
weird how, because they, the like, it was like, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but it was explained to me like, air conditioning and the dehumidification, you need to add heat to add the dehumid to dry, but to add you need to add heat for that air conditioning to turn on. And it's like it's like a circle of things, and you're like, what the heck does this mean?
Well, I can simplify that for you real quick, okay?
Go ahead.
Because
Love it.
I see a lot of things on, social media and
Oh
that's
yeah.
why it confuses people. So, reheat will not get you more dehumidification. What reheat allows you to do is to drop the temperature coming off the coil, the evaporator coil, and so you take that, if you can get that temperature coming off that coil down to below 50 degrees, say 48, 46 degrees, right? You're
Yeah.
going to wring out a lot more water out of the air. And then you use that reheat to take the temperature back up. Because think about it. We're trying to create the perfect indoor day inside the building, right? The perfect
Yeah.
temperature, the perfect humidity. So if it's 75 degrees outside, what temperature is the air blowing around?
Exactly. Yeah.
75. It's
Yeah.
not 55. So plants don't want 55-degree air blowing on them. And you don't want 55-degree air. You don't want to deliver air to the spaces below dew point because then it condenses, right? So so you need that reheat to take the temperature, that 48-degree or 46-degree air, back up to 72 or 73 degrees to deliver to the
Oh, okay.
space. And then you need enough CFM to be able to to keep the heat from the lights down, you know.
Yep. It's
So
just a lot. It's a big balance of things, it's crazy. Like when you see some of these automated systems and they're doing things to like everything has got to work together. Like we're saying earlier, like no silos and all that. What do you see some of the emerging trends in technology right now, like to help manage with the HVAC and engineering side of it?
yeah, there's some things happening, mostly with refrigerants right now on the HVAC side of things.
Hmm.
For global warming and being more sustainable. But really, probably some of the biggest trends I see is like under canopy lighting. You're
Oh yeah.
probably well aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of a big trend right now. Um, Now, I don't think that we know enough. I don't think enough. What's the best way of putting that? More scientific type of studies do. Like people will run trials in a room, but they don't necessarily track everything. So,
I mean, they
you
might
know,
not even have the capacity to track it either.
that's true. Yeah,
They
that is
might
true
not, I
too.
mean, because so many growers, there's so much great technology out there, but are they actually logging all this data points? Are they putting in their set points, their times? When are they running it? What percentage? Did it affect the temp? Like we were chatting about that earlier, did it affect the humidity? How much power did it add to the room? Did they reduce the top light to manage the bottom light? As they running, there's some, I mean, there's some definitely, I can see some benefits in getting some more yields, but like you and I were talking, the other day, is that there's some bro science and then there's some science.
Well, and sometimes it's not because it's because they just don't think to do it, right?
Hmm.
So it's like I had a customer, they ran a trial on under canopy lighting, and they said, hey, we want to convert this whole room over. Um, are we going to be okay on air conditioning? I'm like, well, how much more watering do you think you're going to do? Um, well, I don't really know. I said, well, what did you do in the trial? Right? Well, we didn't think to track that, you know, and because they aren't necessarily dealing with with that information, right? Like I need
Yeah.
that information so I can make sure that we got the moisture removal. More than likely, because because of the way things work, we have to oversize. If you're doing an integrated system where the unit is doing dehumidification and the cooling, you have to oversize it quite a bit to get the moisture removal out. So you have a lot of extra cooling available for the lighting side of things, if that makes
Okay.
sense. So likely for that piece of the puzzle, it's probably fine. But the dehumidification piece of the puzzle. So if you increase if you increase lighting by 20%, you might be increasing transpiration from the plants 20% or thereabouts. And so that
Right.
equipment may not be able to handle that extra load, especially in a big room like behind me, right? That's I know that equipment does 300 and some pounds of moisture removal an hour. So you take 20% of that, that's another 60 pounds an hour, you know.
So that's a lot.
Um,
Now,
well,
now
if you want to put it in other terms, if you were using like an Andon 710 dehumidifier, can I use manufacturers' names on
yeah,
this?
totally fine.
Okay. So if you were, that's just because I know what that one is in my head. I believe that's about 29 pounds per hour at 80 and 58. So you would have to use, you know, two or two and a half of those would have to be added, to cover that additional moisture removal, right? And but it also adds more heat to the space. So you have to balance that too to make sure that you're not over taxing, the other cooling component that you need.
Well,
So there's a
we're
lot of
saying
things to take into consideration.
well, the stuff needs to talk together. So exactly what you said. So you could add three engines to it, but all of a sudden now, can the air conditioning handle it? Can the HVAC handle it? But do they actually have the power available at the building to power those engines
True.
too? So, there's
Yeah.
all these different things that when people are properly designing and building it and not creating silos, everything is kind of talking to each other. Everything has to talk to each other because you can't change one thing without something affecting somewhere else in a grow. I mean, we chat about this all the time with customers, and I'm sure you do too, about you have to have everything kind of working harmoniously together. It's got to work
Hmm.
together, or else there's gonna be a lot of room for flaws because it's science. I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah.
been science. It's indoor growing is science, and people that say it's not, or it's different at scale too versus a small grow. I mean, you and I chat
Oh
about it all
right.
the time.
Well, and depending on the size, we might recommend a different type of system, because the whole return on investment, capital investment type thing, it needs to balance out because it's their money that's being spent, not mine. And I don't care who or what they buy, I just have to give them information so that they make a good decision and
Yep.
recommendations. One of the things that we're doing right now, a lot of in some markets, is expanding canopy.
Yep.
And some of the very first, obvious thing to do is like the room behind me is let's add a second tier to this room, right? And because that's if you got the space, it's easy to go up. Costs a lot more to build out. And so there's a lot of challenges to that. And mainly, as you can imagine, if I double the canopy in this room, I'm likely going to double the HVACD and I'm going to double the lighting, right?
Yep.
And so then the next question is, how do I do that without increasing the electrical service? Because you're maxed out. I mean, when they
Yeah.
build these facilities, they don't put extra in them, right? Because it costs money. And
Ton of money.
so, yeah, and there's other places to spend that money. And so they're usually taxed out. Well, we came up with a few things, and it's not really rocket science. It's like we work with the grower and say, hey, you're not running an offset schedule here. So if you did that, I can double your canopy more than likely without increasing your HVAC or without increasing your electrical service, right? It's pretty simple, but you have to go in, you have to analyze, you have to do the math, you got to get the bills from the utility. There's a lot of things that happen. Now, if they're using HPSs and and it's a single
That's
level
a tough one
grow
too.
and they go to LEDs, things get a lot easier.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you said, it can sometimes that can like almost be oversized as well. But then they're gonna have to back off of things a little bit. So I mean, it's super in system like to have these systems integrate with each other so they can kind of everything's chatting back and forth. You
Well,
know.
the plants can cool themselves quite a bit. The natural, transpiration process kind of makes that room into an evaporative cooler or a cooling tower, if you will. I mean, it will to some degree. Now they're not able to do 100% of it, but to some degree, they cut that almost in half. You know, more than likely. and sometimes more and sometimes a little less. You just have to do the calculations based on what the transpiration rates are and the BPD and all those types of
So,
stuff.
I mean, coming back to it, like, where do you feel like like you're saying, like keeping track of like transpiration and all those things, is that something that the grower is doing, or is that like, I'm just thinking like data collection. Like, where do you think, like, is that important data for them to collect, or is it, you're more concerned, like, if someone was adding to the grow, either a second tier or they're adding more rooms and they're expanding out versus up, what's important to you for their growing style? What information do you need from them?
Well, geez, so it takes me back to one thing. So a lot of times, we have this checklist of information we need to do our job, right? I need
Yeah.
to know, what the canopy size is, what's your plant density, how many square foot per plant, how many plants do you have in there, the canopy square feet, the lighting, what's the number of lights and the wattage needed to get the correct PPFD at the surface that you're looking for. We go to the lighting manufacturer to help with
Yeah.
that layout. And then it's like, well, what's the watering rate? And they'll say, well, I want you to figure a gallon per plant per day. And I'm like, man, that's a lot, and at $4,000 a ton of air conditioning, you add 20 tons to this room, you just, added
Thanks.
$88,000. You double that. You add, 200 ton. It's exponential. And so it's just as bad to oversize the room as it is to undersize it. You oversize it, you don't get the control that you need in the room. So then we'll say, well, look, my experience has shown from a lot of other jobs that the watering rate is a lot less. Does that include your runoff or not? And they go, well, I don't know. I said, well, let's do an experiment. Let's put an emitter in a graduated, container, and
Right.
then put a tray underneath a plant next to it with the same emitter in it. And then at the end of the day, see how much water is left in the tray and then how much is in the graduated container. And the difference, of those two is what went through the plant. You know, that's what I'm concerned with. How much moisture moves through that plant? And plants
Like
don't suck
naturally occurring
water.
moisture?
They do not suck water, believe it or not. They don't have, they it's all based off of vapor pressure. So if the pressure inside the grow media is higher, which is when you have water in there, it's higher than what's in the air, then the vapor moves through the plant or the water moves through the plant like a straw, and it comes out through the stomata. Well, the stomata need to get warmed up from the lights of the heat so that they're more elastic because they don't have a brain. They're just reacting based off of the pressure. So the pressure inside, you know, their biomass versus the pressure that's in the air. And if that pressure in the air is too high, guess what? The stomata don't open to let that water out.
Yeah.
So they don't transpire. That's why, we know that BPD, you want to stay between 1.1 kilopascals and 1.5 in a flower room. That's the optimum spot to be. And but I don't want to oversize the system because you're penalizing two ways. You're not going to get the control you want, and number
Okay.
two, you're going to spend a lot of money for that extra, tonnage that you may not need just because I got wrong information, and
Yeah.
that's important. And usually, almost every time, the guy tells me a gallon a day, unless he's growing freaking trees, right?
Yeah.
Which would
There are
equate to
people that do
that,
that.
but
There's
it
people like
almost
their
comes
big
back
plants.
to it almost always within, a couple of percent, it'll be a liter, you know, per square foot of canopy a day. And that equates to about a quarter of a gallon a day, right? So
Yep.
if they tell me a quarter of a gallon or zero point 0.3, I'm not going to argue about that. But if it's a half, and then maybe it is a half, but it's 3 square foot per plant, instead of 1.5 square foot per plant. So the canopy is the same. The plants got bigger. So,
Interesting. Yeah, it's
uh,
it's really, I find it, every time I'm on calls with you and your team and or like just engineers in general, and like we're learning about it and the questions they have, there's so many things that are getting tied together because you're just there's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and you're pulling all this together and trying to make sense of it because there's a conceptual, it might even just be the person's concept. I had a call today and the person had a pretty rough drawing. I'm like, well, what are your next steps? Because I'm going to tell you what mine are in order to get this, how soon are you getting there? But what are some red flags cultivators should watch out for when they're choosing integrators and consultants?
Well, of course, I would always, recommend, I would check references always,
Yeah,
um, if you can't, if they can't give you a dozen people that'll say good things about them, that would be a red flag to me, right? And you can always check around too. You can ask, hey, did you use Anvil or did you use, brand X or whatever? Um, I would also say that they need to have a lot of experience in this space. I, for instance, you wouldn't um, you wouldn't go hire a car mechanic to work on your heart, right? I mean,
exactly.
takes different skills for both of those things. It's the same thing in the
Yeah.
engineering community and architecture community. I mean, we're talking about systems here, but the building is a system too. And I need that room to be 100% sealed. I had a project north of the Mason-Dixon line. So in the wintertime, the humidity just drops outside, you know, rapidly, right?
Yeah.
And at night, um, the we couldn't keep the rooms warm enough at night because there wasn't it was an integrated system with hot gas reheat, so the compressors weren't running because we were losing energy out of the room, you know, and so the
Interesting.
compressors didn't stay on to make hot gas to be able to put heat back into the space. And what we figured out was that there was like 90 some lights mounted to the ceiling, and the electrical contractor had drilled a 1 inch hole for a half-inch piece of conduit. And so it was like the room was like now a Swiss cheese. So all that moisture that the plants were transpiring was leaking out of the room,
Just
because the
venting,
plants
it's just
still
venting
continue to
out.
transpire after the lights go off a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it was just being sucked out of the room. It's the same principle that we talk about with VPD on the plants. There's a VPD in your room too. And the pressure in the room, if it's higher than the pressure outside, it's going to moisture is going to travel from high pressure to low pressure. And so that's exactly what was happening. We got those holes filled in and the room came back into control. So
How do you even like know to look for that stuff? I mean, it's interesting. Like I work with, I end up talking to a lot of people and they're hiring different consultants, and everybody has a different methodology. And a lot of times they're not even thinking of like the operational side of it too, and then because the operational guy is the consultant that has owned a grow or has a pretty big grow, and they're kind of running it. They're not just going there as like they're doing some theoretical calculations with the person, but they were like, hey, we have to get together with the engineer because the engineer is going to be tying together all these things that we need to do and what's important. So it's kind of funny like how it's like choosing that right team, I think, is very important. Someone that's either had the experience or there's just seems to be there still seems to be a lot of snake oil out there in the industry. I mean, it's
well,
crazy.
and engineers, they're kind of a odd bunch, right? And they like challenges. So you go to a guy that's been designing schools, right? Never designed an indoor grow, and you say, hey, I'd like for you to design me an indoor grow, and he goes, yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah, I can give that a try. You
Yeah.
know, and he's going to learn on your project. Now, granted, I did the same thing, right? When I
Everybody had
started
to
doing
start
this,
somewhere.
we started somewhere, but I did my homework and I went all around the country trying to learn everything I could so I would make fewer mistakes. And I did. Obviously, we're still in business. So, um, but finding the right team that's got the right experience, that has worked together before, check the references. If you can't find 6 different customers that will say something good about somebody, that would be a red flag for me. And
Yeah, we say that. We say a lot
definitely.
even too. Like I always say, check out everybody and the experienced guy, even like the growers, like sometimes I'll call it legacy growers. When they're finally talking to me, and they might even be doing it to you too, but they've already looked at our social media, different aspects of different things. And if they've been around for a little while, they're not afraid to reach out to them because they're all kind of, if they all kind of cut from the same cloth, they had the same challenges coming up in the industry. So they're already reaching out to us. So it was funny. I met someone out in Las Vegas at MJ Biz. I reach out to the owner, and this guy's like, we'll talk to the grower, roundabout way. So I end up calling the grower. I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. Maybe you did a text intro. I'd love to set up a time to chat. So as soon as he's like, here, send me email some information. So I send the information, and he calls me right back. I already emailed. He's like, I met a person that's using your product in another state, and I was helping him consult in this state, and now I'm over here. Like he's like, this guy was from Rhode Island. I was working with him in Mass. He goes, I'm in Pennsylvania, but this grows like in a roundabout way. Like it's so if you leave a good reputation, like say if you have a good reputation and people know, all of a sudden it'll come back. It'll be good. It's all good stuff. They know that you provided them with something quality.
Now, one thing that we always say is that we don't just do jobs and walk away and you never hear from us again. We are constantly calling our customers up and saying, hey, what did we do? What did we do good? What did we do bad? What could we have done better? If you
Yeah.
could change anything, and you'll get some feedback. And sometimes you'll actually get feedback and you'll say, well, how are you? What, why is that happening? You know, and they explain something to you, and then you find out that they're not using something correctly. And so you can help them figure out, what they're doing wrong, and then they start using it correctly and they go, oh man, if that's, I wish I'd have called you 6 months ago if that's all I needed to do. They thought
Somebody just
something was
had like a
wrong and really
5 minute
nothing was
check-in phone
wrong.
call.
Yeah.
I just had
um
someone too just recently, like a customer that I've known for, a bunch of years. They're from up in Maine, and they had a new grower, and the guy reached out to set up time, and I called them, and it just, I know what their challenges are. They're running some of our lights, but they have a bigger size grow, and they're running a whole mishmash of stuff. So they've got a litany of things, but good people. And I'm like, we're here to help. I'm like, let's, the rooms that they're running with our stuff is they're doing great, but they're just trying to figure out how they're going to get to the next step in the next level. And they've been around for, caregivers for 20 years, so it's, then they kind of
yeah,
go into the commercial side, but they're just trying to get people up to speed and, choose the right team, choose the right people, make sure everything integrates together and how things, how they work together. We're like when they're building these, grow rooms, because they have to be efficient.
we might be building buildings, but we're also building relationships. These are lifelong relationships. I got a lot of friendships that have grown out of working, relationships. Um, And I will tell you that my best marketing is the grower that I make happy. I make a grower happy, he's going to tell 5 or 6 of his grower buddies, hey, use this guy. He's great, or whatever. Or don't use this guy. He might, if he has a bad, experience, they're going to do the opposite. So
Yep.
keeping customers happy, giving good customer service, that's the that's a big chunk of what we do. You got to be technically right, but there's that other piece on top of that that will keep customers around.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, this is great, but I'm just looking at being, I just trying to help everybody and help everybody get to the end finish line. Get to the end game where they're being
Yeah.
successful, because the more success that they have, the more success that we have. But what are the things that you guys want to talk about? I mean, I'm just looking at the time, and all of a sudden time clicks away as we're sitting here chit chatting. It's
Yeah.
funny. But what is there anything else that you would touch base on? I mean, instead of you and I can both go down rabbit holes for sure.
Well, I'll turn the tables on you. So what are you seeing? What kind of things are you seeing that's new coming down the pipe that people should be aware of?
I mean, coming down the pipe, or like there's things that being aware of, like, so I'm seeing a lot of the grows, in the last 5 years that I've been in the industry. It feels like dog years, but I see people building, it's like speed to market. If they can get up and running sooner, if they can capitalize on a higher value, so they're building smaller grows, building within their budget. Some people, there's, it's not the golden ticket anymore, that, the green ticket, where if you got a cannabis license, people threw money at you. So things that I'm seeing, like as a whole, that's what I'm seeing. People are building a little bit smaller, which I think it's great.
Yeah.
Get up and running,
Well,
know how to run the place.
yeah, this business, I mean, I don't know that I'd want to be a grower. I mean, this is not an easy business to got a lot of, you got regulations, you got pest management, you lose, the room behind me is probably worth a couple of $1 million a harvest. You lose that, and look how much
Yeah.
money you just lost, and all that effort and energy and resources that went into it could be destroyed by just doing one little thing wrong, or certainly diminish the quality of product. And I don't, a lot of people will say, it's weeds, you're going to make money hand over fist. I'm like, you still have to run this business. It's still a business. It's still got all these, these variables pulling you in different directions that you have to be smart about. It's not
Yeah.
an easy thing.
No,
It's
and you
not.
bring up an absolute good point. Like it's some people I visit because I love going on the road, and you see like you're talking to a grower, and there's so many great growers out there. It's great, and they can all grow a good product. And some people have the attitude or the mentality or the mindset to, hey, listen, put me in there, and I'm going to make sure that this thing is successful. It doesn't matter what I give you. Give me HPS, give me CMH, give me LEDs. I'm going to grow well, no matter what HVAC system. I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to grow this plant for that room. There's other people that they're building the room around the grower, and the grower is so adamant that the best way to do is this. So, and maybe it is for them, but I think every grow, I'm sure you see it, I don't see two grows the same. And then there still needs that, so there's all these, everything's different everywhere you go. But then there's the owner. So I'm talking to an owner yesterday, and this guy's obviously a successful businessman. He's got owns, multiple hotels, multiple things. So there's all things going on. But that grower can grow great product, and you can grow massive amounts of great product. But if you don't have the business acumen and the branding and marketing portion of it to get that stuff to market, it didn't really matter. I mean, you can grow the best stuff, and if you can't get it to market and sell it and get it out there, there's that part of it. So
I tell you what, I know a project's going to be a great project. I mean, I know it's going to be better than a great project, right? When they come, when the first meeting they start talking about their business plan. This is our business plan. So now you're truly starting at the plant level, right? The business plan drives how much, you know, product you need to make, right?
yeah,
That, then that drives the number of rooms, that drives the number of turns, that drives the size of the facility,
oh yeah,
that drives how big the parking lot needs to be, because you're going to have 80 people working in this building. I mean, the business plan drives everything and should drive everything. It's not the other direction. You don't start from a 30,000 square foot building and then tell me what I can do with it.
I've got a friend that's got some SOPs. I'm just going to adapt those.
Or I'm gonna have AI write my SOPs for me.
Oh God, man, it's gone. It's just crazy. But well, this has been great, Jim. I mean, I love like having
Yeah,
me on
yeah,
the podcast and just chatting through it and kind of talking. Look forward to like doing more projects together.
absolutely. Yeah.
Gail will post. We'll actually put all your tags and everybody. This is Jim Megerson from Anvil Agronomics. Been in the industry for many years, and it's great to have him. He's a great resource. I can just kind of send a text and
Well,
ask a quick question and try to. He can usually give me a pretty good answer
well,
on
I
stuff.
appreciate those kind words, and like I always tell everybody, if we disappoint you in some way, please let us know, because that's we want to make it right. And I've been, I got into this business, because a family member, um, and I was bored. I was bored doing the same old thing every day.
Sure.
I was looking at retirement down a tunnel. Now there's no tunnel, because I don't know that I really want to retire all that soon. I'm really having fun and challenging doing this kind of work. And and I think that's what gets us up every day.
Yeah, I
We're doing
agree. It's
something
fun.
fun.
It's exciting. I love going out there and talking to people, and showing them for me, like it's getting the lighting quote and talk to them about lighting is great, but want to learn more about it. And I think, like you say, it's like it's a big holistic approach of tying everything together and being that person like, hey, how about we do this, or have you thought about that? Just kind of flowing some ideas that you think it's not necessarily my idea, but just trying to getting people to think out of the box and learning more about it. But thank you so much, Jim.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it
Thank
having
you,
you on the
Tony.
show.
Yes. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Great, thanks.